Hello students and welcome to my virtual class. So today we'll be looking at the topic, the human respiratory system. So before we dive into the topic, let's look at our learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to 1. Explain the respiratory system and respiration. 2. Enumerate the mechanism of breathing. 3. State and explain the parts of the respiratory system. So just look at this scenario and let's look at what is happening in this video. Just as we need fuel for our vehicles to move, similarly or likewise, we need oxygen to function. So without oxygen, you should know that the cells and the organs of our body cannot perform some specific function. Now, you know that we have different types of cells in our body, and all these cells come together to form organs, and the organs come together to form a tissue, and the tissues comes together to form a system. So you should know that all the cells in our body really need oxygen to create energy. And it is this energy that we use to do work. But how does this energy reach the cells? Have you ever thought of that? It is through the process of respiration. Now, I need you to study this image that is animating in this video. You can see it is an image of our lungs. And when we breathe in air, it passes through our nose or our mouth when we are talking. And have you wondered, this air that passes through our nose, where does it go? The air travels through the trachea. The trachea, or we also know the trachea to be called the windpipe. So you should know that the air travels through the trachea called the windpipe. Now, after it passes through the trachea, do you wonder what happens? Now, this air, after passing through the trachea, it will branch. There are some branches of trachea. We call them the bronchioles. The bronchioles, these are the tiny branches of the trachea. And it passes through the branches of the trachea called bronchioles to reach the lungs. So you should know from the trachea or the windpipe to the bronchioles, then to the lungs. Now, once this air gets to the lung, what does it do? It is further divided to go to the different parts of the organs of the body, such as the intestine, the kidney, the stomach, and you can see them coming out one after the other, and the brain, among others. So that is exactly how those air are being distributed to the different organs of our body for function. So let's look at the topic itself, which is the respiratory system. So what is the respiratory system? So the respiratory system is a system that supplies oxygen to the bloodstream and remove carbon dioxide, otherwise also called CO2, through gas exchange in the lungs, essential for cellular respiration and energy production. So let's look at some key terminologies in respiration. Number 1, exhalation. So simply means it's taking out carbon dioxide, also called CO2. So exhalation is the process of exhaling air from the lungs, removing carbon dioxide from the body and completing the breathing cycle. Let's look at another terminology in the topic, and that is inhalation, from the word inhale, that is to take in oxygen. It is the process of drawing air into the lungs, that is bringing oxygen into the body, that is essential for cellular respiration and energy production. Now let's go to the third terminology, and that is respiration. You can see when air comes into the lungs expand. This is the process by which living things take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, enable energy production and maintaining vital cellular functions in the human body. You can. So now let's go to the fourth terminology for the topic, and that is metabolism. Now, what is metabolism? It is the sum of all chemical reactions in the living organism. You should know that there are some chemical reaction that is going on in our body that can convert food into energy and building blocks for growth and maintenance. So when we eat, so those food are being converted into energy for growth and maintenance of our body. Now, what are the importance of this respiratory system that we are talking about? Number one is oxygen supply. Oxygen supply. So this system ensures that oxygen is delivered to the cells in our body for metabolic processes. We need oxygen in our body so metabolic processes can occur. Number two importance of the respiratory system is carbon dioxide removal, that is CO2 removal. The system helps to remove carbon dioxide, also called CO2, a waste product of metabolism from our body. So carbon dioxide is a waste product of metabolism. Number three, let's look at another importance of the respiratory system is energy production. It provides the energy needed for all cellular activities by converting glucose and oxygen. So another one for energy production, the oxygen will be converted to glucose. Then number four, it supports vital functions in the human body. So it is essential for the functioning of vital organs, including the brain and the heart. So you should know that energy are being supplied to our brain and also our heart for vital organs function. Let's look at the fifth importance of the respiratory system, and that is maintaining the pH balance of the human body. It helps to regulate the pH of the blood, maintaining homeostasis, and understanding respiration is fundamental to the grasping of how our bodies sustain life and maintain health. So it is very, very important. So you need to understand that the respiration is fundamental to the grasping of how our body sustains life and maintain health. Without that, our body will not be able to function properly. So, breathing process. Let's look at how does breathing happen in the human body, also called mechanism of breathing. So you should understand that this mechanism of breathing involves two main stages, which is inspiration and expiration. That is to inhale and to exhale, to bring in and to bring out. So let's look at the first one, inspiration, and what does inspiration mean? Inspiration is also called inhalation, that is taking in oxygen through the nostril and the mouth. But before we move into the breathing mechanism itself, let us look at what is breathing. So let's look at what is breathing itself. When you say breathe, to breathe, what does it mean? So breathing, this is the process in which air moves in and out of the lung, is also known as breathing. So when air moves in and out of our lung, it's also known, and it is carried out through various respiratory organs. In other words, breathing is a simple as give and take process. Now let's go back to our breathing mechanism, that is mechanism of our breathing. So the stage one, in this process of inspiration, there would be a contraction of the muscle attached to the ribs on the other side, which pulls out the ribs and results into the expansion of the chest cavity. Later, the diaphragm contracts, moves downward and expands the chest cavity, resulting in the contraction of the abdominal muscles. So let's look at what happened in stage 3 of our breathing mechanism. The expansion of the chest cavity produces a partial vacuum which absorbs air into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. So let's look at the action words in the inspiration process, that is taking in of oxygen. What are those action words that are being used? We have inspiration, and that is the active process because it involves taking in oxygen, so it is active. Then the thoracic cavity. What happens to the thoracic cavity? The volume of the thoracic cavity increases and the air pressure decreases. Once the thoracic cavity increases, then the intercostal muscle will contract. The intercostal muscles in the lungs will contract. And what happens to our diaphragm? Our diaphragm will also contract. Then what happens to the lung? When your diaphragm contracts, the lungs will expand and the air pressure in the lungs will need to decrease, leading to the atmospheric pressure to rush in. Atmospheric pressure we have to rush into the lungs. Now, let's look at the second part of the breathing mechanism, which is the expiration, that is taking out. So what is expiration? The process is considered once after the gaseous exchange occurs in our lungs and the air is expelled. The expulsion of the air is called expiration. So what is expulsion? Expulsion is when you are taking something out, removing something. So it's called expiration. So let's look at what happens during expiration. During this process, muscles attached to the ribs will contract. Then the muscles of the diaphragm and the abdomen will relax, which leads to a decrease in the volume of the chest cavity, and increase in pressure of the lungs, causing the air in the lungs to be pushed out through the nose. So let's look at the action words in expiration process. Number 1 is expiration. And what is expiration? Just as what I've said before, is exhaling. You are taking out carbon dioxide, which is also called CO2. Then it is a passive process. Remember that the inhalation is an active process, but in expiration, it is a passive process, that is no active effort. Then the size of the thoracic activity, the size decrease and the pressure also decrease. The muscle action, intercostal muscle relax and contract. What happens to the rib? Pulls inward and reduce, while the diaphragm state is relaxed and the lung compressed. And the pressure changes and it is increased and it is expelled out of the body, that it goes out of the body. So the key points of the mechanism of breathing, let's look at the key point, the summary of what I have explained. Number 1, that breathing is a physical process of breathing in oxygen and taking out oxygen, that is exhaling carbon dioxide. Number 2 is that the mechanism of breathing involves 2 main processes. Number 1, inspiration and expiration. That is taking in oxygen and taking out oxygen. Taking out carbon dioxide. The inspiration occurs when the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle contracts. Expiration occurs when the diaphragm and the intercostal muscle relaxes. That is another thing that happens during the process of breathing. Then another point is that's number 5. If the pressure inside the lung is more than the outside, the air rushes out. And if the opposite happens, the air rushes in. So you need to understand the work of pressure. Then the last part is, due to the high elasticity of our lung, you should know that our lungs, it expands and relaxes. The tissues and the low surface tension of the moisture in the lungs, and the lungs have higher compliance. So let's look at the part and the function of the respiratory system. Number 1 is the nose and the nasal cavity. What do they do in the respiratory system? It filters the air, and it warms and it moisture the incoming air and detects odor. So you should know that's what our nasal cavity does. It helps us to take in air. Apart from what it detects odor. Number two, let's look at the pharynx, also known as the throat. It is a pathway, a passage, like a pathway, like a place you can pass for air from the nasal cavity to the larynx. That is, the throat is just like a passage that allows the air to pass from the nose to the larynx. So the larynx is like a passage, like a pathway. Then number three, the larynx, which is the voice box, that is our voice box, it produces sound from speech. As you can see me talking, what is bringing out this sound is from my voice box. And it's also the route for air and food into the proper channels. That is, the air goes through the right channel and the food passes through the food pipe. Number four is the trachea. The trachea is also called the windpipe. It connects the larynx to the bronchi. Apart from that, it also filters the air and it also moistures the air that passes through the trachea. That's what the trachea does. It connects the larynx and the bronchi together. So let's look at the bronchi, the fifth one. So what does the bronchi do? It branches from the trachea into the each lungs. Don't forget that we have two lungs, the right lungs and the left lungs. So the bronchi are divided into two and further divided into smaller bronchioles. So we have two bronchi and the bronchi is further divided into smaller pieces called the bronchioles. So let's look at the bronchioles. Smaller air passes through the bronchioles, and it leads to the alveoli. And it controls airflow. That is, the bronchioles controls the airflow, resistance, and air distribution. It also distributes, is the one in charge of the distribution of air to the different parts of the body. So let's look at the lungs. Lungs is the main organ of respiration. It houses the alveoli where gas exchange occurs. So you should know that our lungs is the main organ of respiration. Without the lungs, respiration cannot occur. And this is an image of an healthy lungs. Now let's look at the work of the alveoli. So what does the alveoli do? They are tiny air sacs. Don't forget, I told you that the alveoli is in charge of distribution of air to the different parts of, and so they are tiny air sacs where oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged between the lungs and the blood. So they are in charge of distribution of air to the different organs of the body. So let's go to the ninth one, which is our diaphragm. We'll be looking at our diaphragm shortly. So what is the function of the diaphragm? It is the main muscle of respiration. It contracts to allow the lungs to expand during inspiration. That is, when we are taking in air through our nostrils, the diaphragm will need to what? Contract, so air can be allowed to flow into the lungs. So that is how it contrasts from the video. So let's look at the division of the respiratory system. So this respiratory system that we've been talking about since, it is actually divided into two parts. And namely, they are the upper respiratory tract, and the lower respiratory tract. So we have two types, the upper and the lower respiratory tract. So we are going to be looking at one after the other. But firstly, we are going to start with the upper respiratory tract. And let's look at the function. What does it do? It conducts, it filters, it humidifies, and warm inhaled air. That is all the air that is coming into our nostril. The upper respiratory tract help us to conduct them, they filter them, they humidify them, and they warm the air. So let's look at the part of the upper respiratory tract. tracts. So number one is the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity, where our nasal cavity. Number two is the paranasal sinuses. The paranasal sinuses. Number three is the pharynx, or we also call them the throat. And number four is the larynx, which is the voice box. So let's look at the lower respiratory tract. What does it do? The function is that it conducts air to the lungs. It facilitates gas exchange. That is, it allows air to get to the lung, and it also facilitates the exchange of gases. That is, we need the oxygen, and it helps us take out the carbon dioxide, which is also known as CO2. Now, let's look at the parts of the lower respiratory tract. Number one is the trachea. The trachea, also called the windpipe. Number two is the bronchi. Then number three is the bronchioles. The bronchioles is being gotten from the bronchi. Then number four is the alveoli. The alveoli, or the alveoli. And then the last one is the lungs. The lungs. And don't forget that the lungs is the main organ of the respiratory system. Now, in summary, you need to understand that these components work together. All these components that we have looked at, the parts of the respiratory system, they all work together to ensure that oxygen is brought into our body and carbon dioxide, which is called CO2, is expelled, maintaining the body vital function. So let's go up to the, you should be able to answer all these questions after listening to this or watching this video. And it is what you should be able to define the respiratory system. You should be able to explain inhalation and expiration. Number three is you should be able to list the parts of the respiratory system. You should be able to list all the parts and state their function. Number four, you should be able to define what the respiratory system is. And the last one, you should be able to explain metabolism. You should be able to explain metabolism. So in conclusion, from all what we have learned so far, you should know that the human respiratory system efficiently exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, ensuring our survival. Understanding its function is crucial for maintaining respiratory health. So you need to understand that the human respiratory system is efficiently in exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, ensuring human survival. Until I come your way another time on another Study Science with the Public School Robotic Educator. Bye for now, and remember that readers are leaders. So remember to brainstorm, to be creative.